The stealth carrier Vengeful Dawn moved through space like a ghost. Its hull was covered in special material that absorbed sensor signals instead of reflecting them. To Valorian scanners, it appeared as nothing more than empty space. Commander Pete Lawson stood on the bridge, watching the stars slide past the view screen. Somewhere ahead lay Nexus Station, the communication relay that connected an entire sector of the Empire. If they could destroy it, thousands of Valorian ships would lose contact with their commanders. Chaos would spread through the enemy fleet. Pete looked around at his crew. 47 volunteers had signed up for this mission, knowing that most of them would probably die. They came from different backgrounds, different countries, different colonies. But they shared one thing, a burning desire to strike back at the Empire that had taken so much from humanity. His sister Molly worked in the engine room below. She had designed the dark matter drive that powered this ship. The technology was beyond anything the Valorians had ever created. When Pete asked her how she had figured it out, Molly just shrugged and said that humans had always been good at building things that shouldn't work. "Approaching Nexus Station," announced the navigator. A young woman named Sarah Cole. "Sensors show 15 Valorian patrol ships in the area." Pete studied the tactical display. 15 ships against 1. Normal commanders would turn back. But these were not normal types, and Pete was not a normal commander. "Find me a gap in their patrol pattern," he ordered. "We only need to get close enough to launch our infiltration team." The plan was complicated, but brilliant. A small team would board the station disguised as maintenance workers. They would plant explosives in the station's core, while the Vengeful Dawn kept the patrol ships distracted. If everything went perfectly, they would escape before the station exploded. Nothing ever went perfectly. Lieutenant Max Grant led the infiltration team. He was a big man with calm eyes and steady hands. Before the Resistance recruited him, he had worked as a construction engineer on Mars. Now he was a soldier. "Remember your training," Max told his team as they prepared their shuttle. "Move fast, stay quiet, and trust each other. We get in, we plant the bombs, we get out. Simple." Nobody mentioned that simple missions usually turn complicated. They didn't need to. The shuttle launched from the Vengeful Dawn's hidden bay. It crossed the empty space between the carrier and the station, transmitting false identification codes that Molly had stolen from captured Valorian databases. The codes worked. The station's security systems accepted the shuttle as a routine maintenance vessel. Max and his team docked without trouble and entered the station through a service airlock. Inside, the station was massive. Corridors stretched in every direction, filled with Valorian workers and their servant species. The Valorians themselves were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. They moved with an arrogance that came from centuries of unchallenged power. Max and his team wore stolen uniforms and kept their heads down. They walked through the corridors like they belonged there, carrying tool cases that contained enough explosives to crack a small moon. Meanwhile, the Vengeful Dawn made its move. Pete ordered the ship to the cloak near the patrol perimeter, revealing itself for just a moment before vanishing again. The Valorian ships went crazy, racing toward the position where they had detected the unknown vessel. "That got their attention," Sarah said with a grim smile. "Keep them chasing shadows," Pete ordered. "Give Max all the time he needs." The game of cat and mouse continued as Max's team reached the station's core. The central reactor room was guarded by Valorian soldiers, but Max had planned for this. His team created a distraction in a nearby corridor, drawing the guards away just long enough for 2 of his people to slip inside with the explosives. Private Jenny Cruz was one of them. She was small and quick, perfect for tight spaces. Her partner, Sergeant Dan Brooks, covered her while she attached the charges to the reactor's cooling system. "How long do we have after activation?" Dan whispered. 12 minutes, Jenny replied. plenty of time to get back to the shuttle. She finished the last connection and activated the timer. The display began counting down. They never made it back to the shuttle dot, and alarms sounded throughout the station. Someone had discovered the explosives. Valorian soldiers poured into the corridors, blocking every route to the docking bay. All teams, abort to secondary extraction point, Max ordered through his communicator. The Vengeful Dawn will pick us up from the emergency airlock on level 7. The team split up, fighting their way through the chaos. Jenny and Dan were cut off from the others. They found themselves trapped in a storage room with enemy soldiers closing in from both sides. "Commander, we're not going to make it," Jenny reported, her voice steady despite the situation. "Get the others out. Complete the mission." On the bridge of the Vengeful Dawn, Pete heard her words and felt his heart break. But he was a commander, and he had to make impossible choices. "Hold on as long as you can," he told her. "You're heroes. Never forget that." The Vengeful Dawn swept in close to the station, taking fire from the patrol ships that had returned to defend their base. Molly pushed the engines beyond their limits, giving Pete the speed he needed to reach the emergency airlock. Max and 11 members of his team made it aboard. The others, including Jenny and Dan, were still fighting inside the station. The timer reached 0. Nexus Station exploded in a ball of white fire. The blast destroyed 3 of the patrol ships that had gotten too close. The remaining ships scattered in panic, their communication links to command suddenly gone. Pete stood at the view screen, watching the debris field spread across space. 17 of his people had died in that explosion. 17 heroes who would never come home. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Pete said, his voice rough with grief. "Send this message to every human who can hear it. The hunt has begun." Across the sector, human slaves stopped their work and listened. They heard Pete's voice and understood. The Empire was not invincible. The Masters could be hurt. Hope, long forgotten, began to grow in human hearts. The Vengeful Dawn limped home with its surviving crew. Behind them, the Empire's communication network burned. The first blow had been struck. There would be many more to come. The warning lights flashed red across every screen in Earth Defense Command. Admiral Grace Holloway stood frozen in front of the main display, watching the feed from Kepler 442b. The mining colony had been home to 10 billion people. Families lived there. Children went to school there. Workers spent their lives digging precious metals from the red soil for their Valorian masters. Now it was burning. The Valorian warships hung in orbit like silver daggers. Their weapons fired again and again, turning cities into ash and oceans into steam. The screams coming through the communication channels lasted only a few seconds before the signal died completely. Lieutenant Danny Moss stood beside Admiral Holloway. Tears ran down his young face. He had family on that world. His sister and her 3 children had moved there 5 years ago for work. Now they were gone. Why? Danny whispered. Why would they do this? Grace knew the answer. The colony had failed to meet its mining quota last month. The workers were exhausted and sick. They had asked for medicine and food. Instead, High Executor Varan had sent death. The Valorians had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They saw themselves as gods and everyone else as tools to be used and thrown away. Humanity had joined their empire 300 years ago, not by choice, but by force. The Valorians had arrived with their massive fleet and given Earth a simple choice: serve or die. Humanity chose to serve. They became workers, laborers, and slaves. They mined asteroids, built stations, and colonized dangerous worlds that the Valorians considered too risky for their own people. In return, they were allowed to live, but the Valorians never respected humans. They called them primitives. They laughed at human art, music, and history. They believed humans were weak creatures who could never threaten the mighty empire. They never bothered to study human history. They never learned about the wars humanity had fought against itself. They never understood that humans had survived ice ages, plagues, and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. They saw only what they wanted to see. Grace turned away from the screen. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Contact Admiral Stone at the Luna base. Tell General Cooper on Mars to begin preparations. Send the signal to all Hidden Fleet commanders. Danny looked at her with confusion. Admiral, what signal? What Hidden Fleet? Grace walked to her private terminal and entered a code that only 12 people in the entire human population knew. The screen changed to show a map of the solar system, but it was not the map Danny had seen before. This map showed shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt. It showed weapons factories buried deep under the ice of Europa. It showed training bases on Titan where soldiers had been preparing for this moment for 200 years. 2 centuries ago, after the first Valorian massacre, a group of humans decided that we would never be helpless again, Grace explained. They started building in secret. Ships that the Empire doesn't know about. Weapons that the Empire has banned. An army that the Empire has never seen. Danny stared at the screen. There were hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers. Weapon systems he had never heard of. We've been waiting for the right moment, Grace continued. Waiting until we were ready. Waiting until we had no other choice. She looked back at the burning world on the main screen. 10 billion of our people just died. We have no more choices left. She pressed another button, and a single word appeared on screens across Earth. The Moon, Mars, and every hidden base in the solar system. The word was simple: reckoning. Across the solar system, humans who had lived double lives began to move. Factory workers who were secretly engineers started activating hidden machinery. Teachers who were secretly soldiers picked up weapons they had trained with for years. Scientists who had pretended to work on farming technology revealed projects that could change the nature of warfare. On Europa, beneath the frozen ocean, shipyard commander Molly Lawson watched the signal arrive. She was 32 years old, with short brown hair and hands covered in engine grease. She had spent her entire adult life building ships that were supposed to remain secret forever. Finally, she said to herself. She walked through the massive underground facility, looking at the rows of warships that gleamed under artificial lights. Each one was designed using stolen Valorian technology, but improved with human creativity. The Empire thought humans were too stupid to innovate. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Molly's older brother Pete worked at the pilot training facility on Titan. He had been flying simulated combat missions for 15 years, preparing for a war that many people thought would never come. When the signal reached him, he gathered his fellow pilots in the briefing room. "You all know why we're here," Pete said. "You all know what we've been training for. The moment has come. Some of us won't survive what's coming, but our children will live free, or they will not live at all." The pilots stood in silence. Every one of them had lost someone to Valorian cruelty over the years. Every one of them had dreamed of this day. Back on Earth, Katie Barnes received the signal on her personal device while teaching her 5th grade class in a small Ohio school. She calmly told the children that class was ending early, then walked to the basement of the school where the local resistance cell had stored supplies for decades. Her husband had died on Kepler 442b. She had watched the broadcast of the bombardment, knowing that he was somewhere in those flames. Her 2 sons, now grown men, were already aboard hidden warships. Waiting for orders. Katie opened a crate marked school supplies and pulled out communication device that could reach anywhere in the solar system without being detected by the Empire. "All cells confirm ready," she said into the device. "Earth stands prepared. Admiral Holloway received the confirmations from across human space. She looked once more at the destruction of Kepler-4 42b. Then she closed her eyes and made a silent promise to the 10 billion dead. "You will be remembered," she whispered, "and you will be avenged." She opened her eyes and spoke to her command staff. "Send a message to every human in the galaxy. Tell them the hunt has begun. Tell them that the Empire will learn to fear us. Tell them that humanity is coming, and we will not stop until we are free." The message went out, traveling through secret channels that the Valorians never knew existed. On 100 worlds, humans heard it and understood. The time for bowing and serving was over. The war for humanity's future had begun. High Executor Voran received the news of Nexus Station's destruction while eating his morning meal. He threw the golden plate across the room, sending rare delicacies splattering against the marble walls of his palace. "Humans did this?" He screamed at the messenger. "Impossible. They are primitives. They cannot even build proper ships." But the evidence was clear. Human attackers had infiltrated the station, planted explosives, and escaped before the blast. An entire sector of the Empire was now cut off from Central Command. Voran's perfect record of control was ruined. He called Admiral Croth his most brutal military commander. Croth had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle. His fleet was the finest in the Empire. "Take the Third Fleet to Earth," Voran ordered. "Destroy every human ship. Bomb every human city. I want nothing left but ash and memory." Croth smiled. He had always thought the humans were allowed too much freedom. Now he would show the galaxy what happened to species that challenged Valorian power. 800 warships gathered at the Imperial staging ground. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory, Croth's personal flagship. It was the largest fleet assembled in a century, enough firepower to shatter planets. They jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading for humanity's home system. Admiral Grace Holloway watched them come. Human spy networks had been tracking Valorian fleet movements for decades, and she knew exactly when and where Croth's armada would arrive. "They're bringing everything," observed Commander Nick Santos, her tactical officer. 800 ships against our 200. Not great odds. Grace nodded. "Then we'll have to fight smarter, not harder. Signal all ships to take positions in the Kuiper Belt. We'll use the ice and rock as cover." The Kuiper Belt was the outer edge of the solar system, filled with millions of frozen objects, ranging from small rocks to dwarf planets. It was perfect terrain for hiding and ambush, thought Dr. Sam. Ortiz joined the command staff aboard the flagship Last Light of Terra. Sam was a physicist from New Mexico who had spent 20 years developing weapons in secret laboratories. His greatest invention was a device that could disrupt the quantum shields that protected Valorian ships. Without those shields, enemy vessels would be vulnerable to human weapons for the first time. "The disruptors are installed on all our main combat ships," Sam reported. "They should work, but we've never tested them in actual battle." "Then this will be their first test," Grace replied. "Let's hope your calculations were correct, Doctor." The Valorian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light near Neptune's orbit. Croth stood on the bridge of Eternal Glory, watching his sensors sweep the system. "Where are they?" he demanded. "Where are the human defenders?" His sensor officer shook his head. "I'm detecting nothing, Admiral." "Perhaps they fled." Croth doubted that. Humans were stupid, but they were also stubborn. They would fight. He ordered his fleet to advance toward Earth in standard formation. The massive armada moved through space like a wall of death, weapons charged and ready. They entered the Kuiper Belt. The first explosions caught them completely by surprise. Human ships appeared from behind frozen asteroids, firing missiles and energy weapons before vanishing again. Valorian vessels tried to return fire, but their targets were already gone. "It's a trap," Croth shouted. All ships formed defensive positions. But it was too late. Captain Linda Cruz piloted her destroyer, the Swift Vengeance, directly at a Valorian dreadnought that had become separated from its escorts. Her ship was small. Her crew was only 60 people. Against a massive enemy vessel, she had no chance in a fair fight. But Linda wasn't interested in fair fights. "All power to engines," she ordered. Ramming speed. Her crew didn't hesitate. They had all volunteered for this. They pushed the Swift Vengeance to its maximum velocity, aiming straight for the dreadnought's engine section. Valorian gunners fired desperately, but the human ship was too fast and too close. The Swift Vengeance slammed into the dreadnought's reactor core. The explosion destroyed both ships. The blast also damaged 3 other Valorian vessels that were nearby. 60 human lives traded for 4 enemy ships and over 2,000 enemy dead. Across the battlefield, human captains followed Linda's example. They used their smaller ships to maximum advantage, striking fast and disappearing into the asteroid field. They aimed for weak points that Valorian designers had never bothered to protect, because they never imagined anyone would get close enough to exploit them. Sam's shield disruptors worked perfectly. Human weapons, which normally bounced harmlessly off Valorian defenses, now punched through and caused real damage. Enemy ships began to explode throughout the fleet. On the last light of Terra, Admiral Holloway directed the battle with cold precision. She moved her ships like chess pieces, always keeping the enemy off balance. "Concentrate fire on their command ships," she ordered. "Kill their officers, and the rest will panic." Nick Santos reported each enemy loss. 3 more destroyers down. A cruiser is venting atmosphere. Another dreadnought has lost engine power. After 6 hours of fighting, Croth looked at his fleet status display with disbelief. He had lost 300 ships. 300. Against primitives with inferior technology and fewer numbers. "Admiral, we should withdraw and regroup," his second-in-command suggested. Croth wanted to refuse. His pride demanded victory. But the numbers were clear. If he continued this fight, he would lose his entire fleet. "All ships, retreat to the staging point," he ordered, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "We will return with more forces." The Valorian survivors jumped to faster than light, fleeing the battlefield. Behind, the wreckage of their comrades drifted among the ice and stone. "Admiral," Holloway let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Humanity had lost 60 ships and thousands of brave souls. But they had won. "Send the news to every human settlement," she said. "Tell them we stood against the Empire's best fleet, and we won. Tell them that we are not slaves. We are warriors." The message spread across the galaxy. On 100 worlds, humans heard about the Battle of the Kuiper Belt. They heard how David had defeated Goliath through courage and cleverness. The Empire could be beaten. The Masters could bleed. Revolution was coming. 3 years passed. 3 years of blood, fire, and sacrifice. The war spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humans on every world rose against their Valorian masters. Mining colonies became fortresses. Factory workers became soldiers. Teachers became spies. The Empire had never faced anything like this. Colonel Tony Vega led the guerrilla forces in the Outer Rim territories. He was a short man with a thick beard and eyes that had seen too much death. Before the war, he had been a cargo pilot, moving supplies between human settlements. Now he moved weapons and soldiers, striking at Imperial targets and disappearing before the enemy could respond. His second-in-command was Major Beth Simmons. She had grown up on a prison world where the Valorians sent troublemakers and rebels. Beth had learned to fight before she learned to read. Her tactics were brutal but effective, We hit their supply convoy at dawn, Beth told her team, pointing at a holographic map of the target area. 12 transport ships carrying food and ammunition for the garrison on Praxis 5. Without those supplies, the garrison falls within a month. One of her soldiers, a young man named Carlos Reyes, raised his hand. What about the escort ships? Intelligence says there are at least 5 warships protecting the convoy. Beth smiled. It was not a friendly smile. That's what the mines are for. We planted them last week along their most likely route. The escorts will be too busy dodging explosions to protect the transports. The attack went exactly as Beth planned. The convoy escorts triggered the hidden mines, creating chaos and confusion. Tony's assault ships swept in from the asteroid field, disabled the transports with precise weapons fire, and captured the cargo before anyone could call for help. 2,000 tons of food and ammunition fell into human hands. The Valorian garrison on Praxis 5 surrendered 6 weeks later, starving and demoralized. Stories like this repeated across the galaxy. The Empire had the numbers and the technology, but humans had something more important: the will to win at any cost. On Earth, the cost was visible everywhere. Valorian orbital strikes had destroyed major cities. New York, London, Beijing, and dozens of others were now rubble and ash. Millions of civilians had died. Katie Barnes walked through the ruins of what had once been Chicago. She was 53 years old now, and the war had aged her another 20 years. Her hair had turned completely gray. Lines of grief marked her face, but she kept working. The resistance needed supplies, and Katie made sure those supplies reached the front lines. She coordinated hundreds of smuggling routes, manufacturing sites, and storage facilities. Nothing moved in the human underground without her approval. Her 2 sons were still alive, fighting somewhere in the outer rim. She received coded messages from them occasionally. Short notes that said they were safe, that they missed her, that they were proud of her. Katie kept those messages in a locket around her neck. They gave her strength to continue. Back in the secret shipyards beneath Europa's ice, Molly Lawson worked on the project that would end the war. She and Dr. Sam Ortiz had been studying captured Valorian technology for years. Now, they had finally achieved a breakthrough. The new drive is ready, Molly announced to Admiral Holloway via secure communication. It's 3 times faster than anything the Empire has. Our ships can now outrun any pursuit. Grace studied the technical data. This changes everything. We can strike anywhere and retreat before they can respond. But there was more. Sam had developed something else, something terrible. He called it the quantum singularity device. It could create a miniature black hole powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. I never wanted to build this, Sam admitted to Grace. But if we want to end this war, we need a weapon that can threaten everything they hold dear. Grace understood. The Valorians would never surrender unless they faced complete destruction. They had to know that humanity could hurt them as badly as they had hurt humanity. Build it, she ordered. But pray, we never have to use it. The intelligence officer, Captain Chris Dunn, brought new information to command headquarters. His spy networks had finally located the Valorian homeworld, a secret that the Empire had protected for millennia. It's in the Krallen Nebula, Chris reported, displaying star charts on the main screen. A planet called Valoria Prime. The entire ruling class lives there. Palaces, temples, government buildings. It's the heart of their civilization. Grace examined the data. Defenses? Massive. 1,000 warships in permanent orbit. Orbital weapon platforms everywhere. Ground-based shields that could stop a meteor strike. Direct assault is impossible. Nothing is impossible, Grace said quietly. We just haven't found the right solution yet. That night, Molly came to Grace with an idea. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, and completely insane. Grace listened carefully. One ship, Molly explained. Just one ship with the new drive. It can bypass their entire defense network by making micro-jumps through folded space. The Valorians don't know this technology exists. They won't see us coming until we're already in orbit. And then what? One ship can't defeat 1,000. It doesn't have to, Molly said. One ship only needs to deliver one weapon. Sam's device. We hold their homeworld hostage. We force them to surrender. Grace was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Find me a pilot. Someone who understands what's at stake. Someone who can make the hardest choice in human history. Molly already knew who to ask. Her brother Pete had been waiting for a mission like this since the war began. He had lost friends at Nexus Station. He had lost more friends in the years since. He was ready to end this, one way or another. I'll do it, Pete said when Molly told him the plan. And I want you with me. Someone has to keep that crazy engine running. Molly nodded. She had expected this. Together then. Like when we were kids. Like when we were kids, Pete agreed. Except this time, the whole galaxy is watching. The preparations began. Humanity's final gamble was about to launch. The ship was called Dying Sun. It was small compared to the warships that had fought in the great battles of the war, but it contained technology that no other vessel in the galaxy possessed. Molly's revolutionary drive system could fold space in ways that Valorian scientists had declared impossible. Pete Lawson sat in the pilot's chair, running final checks on navigation systems. His sister worked below, making last adjustments to the engine that would carry them across the galaxy. How are we looking? Pete called down through the open hatch. Engine is perfect, Molly replied. I'm more worried about the weapon. Sam's calculations are solid, but we've never actually tested it. The weapon sat in the cargo bay, a cylinder about 2 meters long filled with technology that bent the laws of physics. If activated, it would create a singularity that would consume everything within a 100-kilometer radius. An entire city could vanish in seconds. Admiral Holloway visited them before launch. She looked older than Pete remembered, worn down by years of war and impossible decisions. You know what this mission means, Grace said. You're carrying the power to destroy an entire civilization. I'm asking you to threaten billions of lives. Pete nodded. I know, but they killed 10 billion of us on Kepler-4 42b. They've killed millions more since then. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something it fears. Grace reached out and squeezed his shoulder. Come home, Pete. That's an order. The Dying Sun launched from Europa's hidden shipyard, slipping past Valorian sensor networks like a whisper in the dark. Meanwhile, the main human fleet began the largest offensive of the war. Attacking Imperial positions across the galaxy. The distraction worked. Every Valorian warship was called to defend against the human assault. Every sensor station focused on the battle zones. Nobody noticed a single small ship, making impossible. Jumps through folded space. Pete watched the stars blur and stretch as Molly's drive activated. Each jump took them closer to the Krallen Nebula, closer to the heart of the Empire that had enslaved humanity for 3 centuries. We're approaching the final jump point, Molly reported. Once we enter the nebula, there's no going back. I never expected to go back, Pete said. Make the jump. The Dying Sun emerged from folded space above Valoria Prime. The planet spread below them, beautiful and terrible. Silver towers rose from crystal oceans. Gardens covered entire continents. Cities of glass and light stretched to every horizon. This was where the rulers of the galaxy lived. This was where the order to destroy Kepler-4 42b had originated. This was where High Executor Voran sat on his golden throne, commanding the deaths of billions, Alarms screamed across the planet's defense network. 1,000 warships turned toward the tiny human vessel. Weapons platforms activated. Shields hummed to life, but they were too late. The dying sun was already in position. Pete opened a communication channel to the entire planet. His face appeared on every screen in the Valorian capital. "My name is Pete Lawson. I am a human. 3 years ago, you murdered 10 billion of my people because we couldn't dig enough metal from the ground fast enough. Today, I hold the power to do the same to you." He activated the weapons display, showing the Valorians exactly what he carried. Their scientists would understand immediately. Their leaders would know that Pete was not bluffing. High Executor Varan's voice came through the communication channel. The ruler of the galaxy sounded desperate for the first time in his long life. "Stop. We can negotiate. We will give you anything you want. Freedom, territory, reparations. Name your price." Pete thought about the friends he had lost at Nexus Station. He thought about the cities burned on Earth. He thought about Katie Barnes, who had lost her husband and nearly lost her sons. He thought about 10 billion screaming souls who had died for no reason except imperial cruelty. His finger hovered over the activation button. "Molly," he said quietly, "what do we do?" His sister came up from the engine room and stood beside him. She looked at the beautiful planet below, at the terrified faces of Valorians watching their screens, at the finger that could end their entire civilization. "We could do it," she said. "We have the right. After everything they did to us, we have the right. But should we?" Molly was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached past Pete and activated the ship's broadcast system. She connected to every communication network on the planet, every device that could receive a signal. She played the footage from Kepler 442b, the bombardment, the burning cities, the dying screams of 10 billion people. She made the Valorians watch what their empire had done. "This is what your rulers ordered," Molly said to the watching millions. "This is the cost of your comfort. Your servants died so you could have gold and luxury. Did you know? Did you care?" The Valorian population had never seen the footage. Their government had kept it secret, calling it a routine correction. Now they saw the truth. Across the planet, ordinary Valorians reacted with horror. They had believed the propaganda about humans being primitives who needed harsh guidance. They had never questioned the Empire's methods. Now they understood. "We could destroy you," Pete said. "We could wipe out your entire civilization the way you wiped out ours. But we're not going to do that. We're going to give you something you never gave us. A choice." He broadcast his demands. High Executor Varan would surrender and face trial for his crimes. The Empire would release all human slaves immediately. Valorian soldiers would withdraw from human worlds. Reparations would be paid to every human family that had suffered under Imperial rule. "You have 1 hour to accept these terms," Pete concluded. "If you refuse, I press this button, and your homeworld becomes a memory. Decide wisely." The hour that followed was the longest of Pete's life. He watched the planet below as riots broke out in major cities. Valorian citizens, outraged by what they had seen, stormed government buildings and military installations. They demanded accountability from their leaders. 53 minutes after Pete's ultimatum, Varan's own palace guard arrested him. The new speaker for the Valorian government, a woman named Lyra, appeared on screen. "We accept your terms," she said. "The war is over. High Executor Varan will face justice for his crimes. The Empire is dissolved." Pete's hand finally moved away from the activation button. Beside him, Molly let out a breath she had been holding for an hour. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." The dying sun turned away from Valoria Prime and began its long journey home. 6 months later, Admiral Grace Holloway stood on the surface of Kepler 442b. The planet was still mostly dead, but life was slowly returning to the scarred land. A memorial stretched across what had once been the main colony city. Black walls covered with 10 billion names, an elderly Valorian woman approached Grace. She had been part of the delegation that helped establish the peace treaty. "I came to pay my respects," the woman said, "and to ask a question that has haunted me since the war ended." "Ask," Grace replied. "Your pilot had the power to destroy us all. After everything we did, he had every right. Why didn't he?" Grace looked at the endless walls of names. She thought about the war, the sacrifices, the impossible choices that had brought humanity to this moment. "Because revenge would have been easy," she said. "We could have ended your civilization in a flash of fire. But then we would have become exactly what you made us fight against. We would have lost ourselves." She touched one of the names on the wall. "These people didn't die so we could become monsters. They died so we could stay human. Destruction was never our goal. Freedom was." The Valorian woman was silent for a long time. Finally, she bowed her head. "Thank you," she said, "for showing us a better way." The memorial's eternal flame flickered in the evening breeze. Above, the stars were coming out. The same stars that humanity would now explore as free people. The galaxy had changed. The Empire was gone. And humanity had proven that strength was not just about the power to destroy, but about the wisdom to know when not to use it. The war was over. The future had begun.